Hey, just a real quick announcement before we start. Talent night tomorrow. Anybody want to? It's going to be a short and sweet talent night, so more talent is welcome. Just saying. We'll even go with untalented people at this point. Just if you want to get up there. Francis has made it compulsory for all newcomers as part of the yoga exercise.
Yeah.
I don't make the rules.
We could play something. Do you have questions?
I had a quick, you mentioned, I might be paraphrasing, so forgive, let me know if I'm misquoting you, but happiness is an inherent part of what I am, as is truth, love, beauty.
But when you experience truth, love, or beauty, you're happy.
Yeah.
So.
What about the sense that, how do you say, the sense of, because sometimes I do get the sense of, all is well, would that also be a part of?
Yes, that's inner peace. It's the absence of worries.
Mm.
Inner peace, yes.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Niti. A recent ending of relationship has brought about great sadness in me. I am fully aware of the sadness as a contraction. I've inquired into who is the one that is suffering, and I find no one there, yet the roots dig deep in the body. I know love is present and it seems like this sadness wants to be met without any stories. Do you think this falls in the category of irrational feelings and have to just run their course? Or can I inquire deeper into this? First, you said, I have inquired into who is the one that is suffering, and you find no one there. That puzzles me. Because if you wouldn't believe to be a woman that was involved in a relationship that went south, would you still be experiencing suffering? You see, because his investigation is very simple. Because the answer is obviously no. The only reason why you're experiencing suffering is because you believe to be a woman. That's very simple. So if you say that you cannot find the one that is suffering, there it is. You are suffering because you believe to be a woman. So, in other words, instead of being what you know for certain to be, meaning consciousness, you add to that, you superimpose onto what you know for certain to be, consciousness, what you believe to be, a woman. So you shrink consciousness to the size of the woman, and then here goes suffering. So just that, I'm mentioning that because you said, I've inquired into who is the one that is suffering, and I find no one there. But I hope I have helped you finding the one. That's a woman. Now, I know love is present and seems like this sadness wants to be met without any stories. First, let's talk about love. Love is never for a person. So that's also a way we are telling ourselves stories, is by telling ourselves that we love a person. We don't love people. We love the consciousness in people, which is not the same thing. I refer to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where Yajnavalkya, the rishi, is asked, because he had two wives. And one of the wives, right, that's a story, my friend from India, yeah? He has two wives, and one is a little kind of feeling that he's not love or something like that. And he answers, it is not for the sake of the woman or the wife that the wife is loved. It is for the sake of the self that the wife is loved. It is not for the sake of the husband that the husband is loved. It is for the sake of the self, etc. It goes on, Indian way. It is not for the sake of the son that the son is loved. It is for the sake of the self. Just to nail this, to drive this nail a little deeper. So if we believe that we love someone, then we are already telling ourselves BS, And then if we tell ourselves BS, there is suffering down the road, because we have just take a turn into misery lane. So now, another way to look at it that may be helpful. Instead of, that's the story of the bottle which is half empty or half full, depending on whether you are an optimist or a pessimist. A French optimist or pessimist. The bottle is champagne. So, the one way to look at it is the way that, I am miserable because I loved him. Well, in spite of what I have said, that love is not for people, but for the consciousness in people. And I have lost something. Instead, you have gained something. It was not a negative event, it was a positive event. Because you have gained the truth about a relationship. In other words, it was not a good relationship. If it had been a good relationship, it wouldn't have come to an end. So it was not a good relationship, so you have won. You are the winner, you are not the loser. You have to understand that. And also, it's very important not to tell yourself story. Yes, he was not happy in the relationship, but I was. So your feeling is, I am missing the happiness I was enjoying in this relationship. But how could a relationship be happy, be truly happy, if one of the partners is not happy in the relationship. Tell me that. It's not possible. You are kidding yourself in believing that you were happy in the relationship, but in fact you were just afraid that the relationship was not good and that it would come to an end, which it did. So at least the truth came. All of the breakups I have experienced in my life, down the road, have turned out to be positive events, and I'm telling myself, so glad I divorced, so glad I divorced, so glad she left me for this ski pro, for this ski instructor. So glad. What is funny is when that happens, then they come back to you. Too late. Well, relationships are great fun, but don't take them that seriously. These are games we play with our little brothers and sisters. Klaus. Actually, the good relationship is one of friendship. So even in our partnerships, the most important element is friendship, because friendship is a spiritual aspect of the relationship. And friendship is really always mutual, you see. With partnerships, it's not always mutual. But in friendship, it's shared, you know. There is no, because there is no attachment, there is no demand, there is no stickiness. Klaus, you mentioned yesterday, shortly, understanding. Could you please talk more about this? I'm not sure that I truly understand understanding. And hope that you can put some light onto this. First, let's be clear about one thing. When understanding takes place, it is you who understands. Understanding is real. So, therefore, it is the real you who understands. So, then, after the understanding took place, we say, I, as a human body, mind, as a limited entity, I understood. But the limitations of the understander, of this I who claims to have understood, were not present at the time of the understanding. At the time of the understanding, there was consciousness, you, and consciousness alone. Because the thought that you just understood was no longer present, and the formulation of this understanding wasn't present yet. So the understanding takes place in the gap between the formulation of the question as a thought and the formulation of the answer as a thought. You need to have understood to have the answer. You need to formulate the answer. You need to have finished the question to know the answer. So it takes place in this moment when you are alone as consciousness. When you understand what I've just said, that's what I call the understanding of understanding. If you don't, well, think about it, it will come to you. Nothing to worry about. Any questions here?
In paintings, there's
In
paintings or drawings, art. There are objects. There's a description of objects in the negative space around objects, and often it's important to put as much care into the negative space as the objects. And I've been having this experience more recently of the space feeling more primary or having a kind of substance to it, and the objects, it's almost like things sort of flip a little bit. And like during the yoga today, I just wondered if you had advice about this, investigating this and what this is I don't know, just some direction about this.
Well, I can first when we are touched by a painting, by a picture, by the beauty in the picture, the picture is a signpost that points towards the ultimate, towards our true nature, and that's why we are touched by beauty. However, there are different ways, various ways to point, just as there are all kinds of different signposts. And depending on the culture or the type of picture, the way to point to the ultimate is different. For instance, in Far East paintings, it is the space in the paintings that plays its role. So you have the lake, you have the mountain, you have the moon, right? And the lake and the sky, they are almost the same space, right? You have the mountain with a tree, and then you have a very tiny fisherman on its tiny boat, very minuscule. You see, that's a person. And there is this immensity. So it is the space that touches us. See, just as when you're here and you look outside, why are we touched? You see, by the space, the infinity. So that's one way. But there are other ways. For instance, in Western paintings, there are many ways. So let's look at various ones. For instance, normally, what we put at the center of the painting is that which is the most important. The mistake is to put an object smack in the middle of the paintings, because then you eliminate the spiritual quality of it. So you will notice that in the composition of the great masters, is that usually the center is empty, more or less, which enables, a composition which is spiritual, the center is empty. Why? Because emptiness is the most important. So everything around it kind of showcases the emptiness in the center. That becomes very obvious in the mandala, right? The mandala, or everything is orchestrated around a circle, or the Zen painting, you know, the O, you know, that's a minimalist type of painting of this sort. But if you look at Western paintings, the composition are often oriented in this way. For instance, the one I often mention, there is this painting by Tiziano, which is Jesus, the body of Jesus coming down from the cross. So you have the body of Jesus, which is like that, held on both sides by the legs and by the upper body by the disciples. So the body is like that, and then you have the heads of and the torsos of the disciples on top of it, like that, bent on it. So you have a circle, you know, and in the center is empty. That's the Father, right, or the Holy Spirit, whatever. In the center, that's the emptiness. There is also another way to express the absolute in Western painting, which is the light. So I was taking lessons from an old guy who was an artist in France, and he showed me some of his watercolors, and he told me what I have noticed is that the ones that work is when the center is light, where the light is on the center. And why? Because in this case, the light represents not the space, but the light represents the absolute, the consciousness. So often also paintings that works, you have, for instance, a piece of water that reflects the light in landscape painting, right? That's not the only way. Jean Klein made me aware that when the geometric rules of perspective were discovered, you know, then the painters that was around the Renaissance, right? The painters at that moment, it was a great discovery because now they could, with precision, paint buildings and tiled floors, you know, with great precision. You remember that you learn how with the escape point, or I don't know how you call this point in English, but the vanishing points, right, and the vanishing line, the horizon line, and so on. The vanishing point, so you can draw perfect tiled floors, right? And when you look at paintings such as Canaletto, you know, the Venice paintings, then he uses a different way to touch us, which is the feeling of space, again. But then a little bit, so then because the perspective, you kind of embrace the space. You enter in the painting and you feel this liberation. A similar enjoyment as the one you experience when you are when you have a nice vista, a nice panoramic view. So that's another example. Finally, there is also the opposite in paintings, which is that the composition in a painting is kind of the foundation of the painting. It is like the skeleton of the painting, right? The composition. Meaning the general architecture of the painting, the general distribution of the main masses of shade and of color. How that is distributed on the... So, in essence, even a figurative painting, before it becomes a figurative painting, has to be an abstract painting. So in an abstract painting, one way to look at it is you turn it upside down. You take a figurative painting, you turn it upside down, it becomes an abstract painting, right? So to see whether a painting, before you buy an expensive painting, turn it upside down and look it from the distance. Then it doesn't mean anything. You have an abstract painting, and it is very important that you like this abstract painting. And what happens when you turn it upside down like that is that the technical lingo for that is that everything, the depth of the painting disappears because it doesn't mean anything. It becomes an abstract painting. So everything is brought back to the picture plane. So it is, nothing comes out. There is no depth any longer. Everything is brought back. Everything becomes an abstract painting on the picture plane. And that's why it's also important for that very reason not to have just an object in the middle, because that doesn't work. And that the background is as important as the foreground. That is true, what I was saying before about the composition, that the center is empty. That is true if we observe the old masters, even in the art of portrait. There is this Dutch painting, I don't remember who it's a gentleman. It's a very fine painting. There is a head, and there is the hands, and he has a glove in the hand. And so there is a kind of a triangle, you see? And of course, at the same time, it was a good business model, because the painting is relatively big, but there are only 3 parts of the paintings that are painted with great detail. The head, the hand with the glove, and I don't remember which is the other part. And the rest is kind of fast job, right? Yeah. But at the same time, it fulfills its purpose, because these 3 points, the center is empty, and the composition, or the composition gives a feeling of a whole, W-H-O-L-E. That everything is self-contained, that it is the totality, the universe, the oneness, right? So, well, food for thought, for appreciation of pictures.
Yeah, thank you.
Luciana. I did not make myself understood. Yes, you do often say that there is no real distinction between universal consciousness and reality. The difference you sometimes make is only conceptual and has a pedagogical purpose. Yeah, but I don't make a difference. It's one way to point at reality, but it doesn't mean that it is different. I use the wrong word and you hang me on it. But of course, I agree with you that there is no difference, also because this is increasingly my experience. Oneself perceiving reality, no separation between object, my real body is this oneness. My confusion was actually simply intellectual, not experiential, due to what you once said to me. That the statement, everything appears in consciousness, and everything is made of consciousness, imply one another. Perhaps I should rephrase that, because it's all in the fine print. Of course, everything appears in consciousness. That's obvious. Because where else would it appear? Everything that. So I should have said, everything that appears in consciousness. That's what I meant, if you want to hang me on that. Everything that appears in consciousness. And of course, the statement, everything is made of consciousness, is more general. And the statement, everything is made of consciousness, implies that everything that appears in consciousness is made of consciousness. But it doesn't mean that everything has to appear in consciousness. Everything that exists. So, everything is made of consciousness. Everything is, in fact, consciousness. That's what everything is made of consciousness means. At every moment, there is only consciousness / reality, and consciousness / reality alone. Everything that appears in consciousness. So she goes on, you say, I agree that one consciousness cannot be limited to creating what it perceives, and two, there are realms of timeless phenomena that consciousness creates, but which are not perceived through minds or other sentient instrument. However, these realms are perceived by consciousness. It depends what we call perceived then, because to take an example, would you say that the idea of a perfect circle, which doesn't exist in nature, is that this perfect circle is perceived by consciousness? I would say it is created by consciousness, and it is understood by consciousness. But I wouldn't use the word perception, because I would reserve the word perception for a mind-like type of perception. Because then we would have to call understanding a form of perception which is not mind. I mean, these are subtleties, and we are kind of splitting hair and getting nerdy here. But if I would reserve perception, phenomenal perception, to mind-like type of perception. So he said, however, these realms are perceived by consciousness also directly. So does this not mean that they appear in consciousness? If they do, then yes, it is also logical to say that there is no difference between reality and consciousness, and the problem is resolved. Is that so? Well, it depends of what the meaning of appear is, or being perceived is. Also, I would put it this way, we should make a distinction, to use terminology, between noumenal realms, such as the realm of idea, and the nous, consciousness. So noumenal realms are non-phenomenal realms, and then in which case we can say perceived by consciousness in the sense that, but I prefer created. Noumenally perceived by consciousness, but not phenomenally. Perceived through understanding and not through the senses. Luciane, regarding your other question, she said, you hung me on the wrong word I used in the last sentence of my question yesterday. And then said it was a sign of my not being open to the possibilities that I can experience myself without objects. Where is the question? Yeah, I don't know why you made this distinction in your question. And when I answer a question, I answer just the question. I don't think of you as a person having experienced anything in the past or not experienced anything in the past. I just answer a question as it is phrased, as it is put. So, you say in your question, so there would ultimately be no real distinction between universal consciousness and reality. That's what you said. And you said, what do you think? And what I said is that my teaching is that has always been that there is no difference between universal consciousness and reality. So if you say that, you ask me, what do you think? It's like you are not sure. So there would ultimately, you say, be no real distinction between universal consciousness and reality. What do you think? I say, my experience is that there is no distinction, that they are one and the same. That's what I said. And I took the opportunity to point as the fact that all hinges on the experience of consciousness in the absence of perceptions. And, regarding, I'm not denying anything about you. I have the power of a glimpse of truth is self-revealing. You don't need me to confirm it. And I am, but if you want me to confirm it, yes, I'm pretty certain that you had a glimpse of truth. Otherwise, you wouldn't be asking this type of question and be interested in these matters. And you have a very articulate mind, so I was just answering the question on the terms it was asked. I was not answering a person. And you are definitely, the real you is the one who had the glimpse of truth. That's the real Luciana, the one who had the glimpse of truth. Divya. What is the yoga that helps to see through body memories sensations created by ignorance? The most important is the understanding. The understanding is a result of an investigation. The yoga, it's like if you have a children who come to your house with muddy shoes and leaves the mud on your carpet. The first thing to do is to tell the children, when you enter, take your shoes off. Then you clean the carpet, you vacuum clean it. Okay? There is no much point cleaning the carpet if the kids keep coming in and out of the house on a rainy day with a lot of mud outside. So in this metaphor, the understanding is like stopping the kids at the door so that they stop putting mud on the carpet. The yoga is kind of cleaning the carpet. So that's why what I'm trying to convey is that the most important is the understanding, the investigation, stopping the kids. And because often people want to have a recipe to clean the carpet, but it's a lot of work. So it's better to stop the kids first.
Hi, Francis.
Yes.
A couple of days ago, you said something to the effect that once you recognize, then you have to go and live your life. And I'm not very articulate, but I feel in my experience there is a strong desire for more and more clarity of that recognition. But at the same time, I feel that that recognition is in my life. And that I have to see it in the things that I'm interested in and what I do, and find it there. Otherwise, the way I was aiming at this recognition, it won't go any further. So I just wanted to kind of check in with you if you had.
Yes, because you want the confirmation, you receive it from your life. My teacher once told me, first you understand, you investigate, you have thoughts, you have questions. At some point, you have the answers. But still something is missing because you still feel this separation. So you do the yoga, you up until you don't feel this separation. But then you live your life. And you live your life in an artistic manner, because your life becomes your work of art. And he said then basically you celebrate, right? You celebrate. Your life becomes something else. So you will see that over time the enthusiasm that you discover for the truth, for the investigation, for the yoga, then becomes widens up, it is your entire life that becomes your yoga, you see? What you have understood first on the conceptual level, you transpose it on the level of perception in your body. That's a correspondence between intellectual understanding or thinking understanding and feeling and perceiving understanding. But then you apply that to all aspects of your life and you celebrate. You do what is necessary to survive, but no more than 4 hours a day. And the rest of the time it's about celebration. In other words, whatever you really want to be doing. We are all different. And you will discover at that point that maybe some things that you were interested in before you fell in love with truth, and that you had seemed to temporarily cease to generate interest in you, you are interested in them again, but from a very different perspective. Very different. I used to play tennis before I stopped playing tennis. But then I resumed. I used to ski before I stopped, then I resumed skiing. You see, I became interested in music. There are other things that I used to do, and I'm not going to give details. That I was not interested in any longer.
I have a related question or concern for myself, which is I feel that I'm not fully in harmony with you, and I really want to be in that harmony. And I was wondering why I feel this way.
Why?
And what comes to me is that I recognize you point us so often that there is no effort to be made. And I feel that a part of me understands that very deeply. But a part of me resists that. I feel that if I accept that, it almost feels like I'm not going deep enough, just being perhaps lazy. That's the feeling that stays underneath. And
but there is effort and effort, and I have explained that many times. If you are interested in doing something, I call it effortless. It may require intellectual effort. You may get tired at some point of doing it. But if it is what you want to be doing, that's perfect. It is not something I would call effort. Someone is doing research in mathematics or whatever, and they constantly think of their stuff. So for many people it will look like, oh, this guy is nuts, like the astronomer who falls in the well, right? He's nuts, but the inner experience, he's enjoying what he's doing. Or a businessman enjoying business, thinking always about new ways to develop, a politician always thinking about ways to screw, ways to screw the constituents.
I feel that for me this effort is, my whole life is about this recognition, and the tendency seems now that I have a lot of energy, and I just feel that intensity expresses in practices. And
if they are not dull, if you enjoy doing it, if you enjoy doing it, ask yourself deeply this question. If you are not enjoying it, then trust me. Don't do it. If it is repetitive, if you hit a wall, if it gets boring, don't do it. Trust me.
thank you.
But I don't think we are not in harmony, I think.
Thank you.
And same thing for Luciana also.
Francis, how does one distinguish the desire for doing something which you're calling effortless work, effortless activity? Perhaps you might want to call it, being in the flow, I guess, versus the desire for ignorance, for ignorant activities, if that means anything.
Ignorant activity is an activity that you wouldn't be doing unless you would believe to be a human body-mind.
So the difference between what you're explaining to the person who asked the previous question is that you can pursue something, and so long as you have the desire and you're not seeing yourself as identifying yourself as a body-mind, then that's fine.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in this case, if there is no identification with the body-mind, a benchmark to check that out is that then there is a total engagement in what you are doing, because there is no resistance, there is no indecision, there is no desire. Yeah, I want to do this, but at the same time I don't want to do it. You see? And often this type of indecision that we are 50% in favor of it, 50% against it, and in spite of that we're still doing it, often that is the sign of ignorance, of an ignorant desire.
So there shouldn't be some sort of calculative mind in deciding something.
Whether there is a calculation that takes place before, at least at the end of it, there should be a total yes saying to what you're doing.
A total?
Yes saying.
Total yes. I have a follow-up question, which is regarding these universal ideas that is it true that every perceivable object can be reduced to thoughts?
In that sense that everything which is perceived is mind stuff, right? Mm-hmm. For instance, when your perception of this flower, you don't see the flower. You see your perception of the flower.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because, for instance, my perception of the flower is different from yours.
Correct.
I am closer to it, I see it from a different angle. You agree with that?
I agree, yeah.
So, it would be false for you to claim I see the flower, or for me to claim I see the flower. What you see is your perception of the flower. What I see is my perception of the flower. Correct?
Correct, yes.
Now, whereas the flower is deemed to be out there in space as a physical object, your perception of the flower and my perception of the flower are subtle objects. In other words, they are thought-like. A subtle object, unlike a physical object, exists only for as long as it is perceived. Right?
Correct.
A thought exists only for as long as it lasts. When the thought stops, the thought ceases to exist. In the same way, a perception is thought-like in that sense that as soon as it stops, it ceases to exist. Mm-hmm. Whereas the flower out there keeps existing, right? So that's the difference between the physical realm of objects out there that exist independently from the perceptions we have and the perceptions. So in that sense, perceptions, bodily sensations, and thoughts, they are all mentations. In that sense, they are subtle objects that lasts only for as long as they are perceived. They don't have any other form of existence.
So, as far as these subtle objects are concerned, which you can call them not just thought-like, but just thoughts, would you say?
Yeah,
At the end of
I
the day.
use the word, if we reserve the term thoughts for the perceptions that don't belong to sense perceptions and bodily sensations during the waking state, that would be the realm of thoughts. And the totality of the perception, I call them mentations.
You call them what again?
Mentations.
Mentations.
Mind
I see,
mentations.
right.
Mind stuff. Mind stuff.
Thank you.
But in turn, as Atmananda pointed out, mentations appear in consciousness. Before a mentation appears, there is consciousness. We are there as consciousness. During the presence of the mentation, we are there as the witness of it, or the perceiver of it, right? And after the mentation, we are still there as consciousness. And then the next mentation appears. So, where does, and this mentation doesn't have any existence independently from consciousness, right?
Yes.
When it is gone, consciousness remains, but it is gone. Therefore, the true nature of these mentations is consciousness, right?
Right.
Therefore, at all times, what we perceive is consciousness and consciousness alone.
Right.
In fact, there is no mind other than the concept that there is a mind.
Right.
Because the mind is made of mentations. The mind, experientially, the mind is mentations. And experientially, mentations are consciousness.
Right. So, so these mentations, what relationship do they have with the universal concepts as thoughts?
Mentations would be representations of the universal concepts, of universal ideas. We reach a universal idea through some form of understanding. And for instance, even if we take a table, and the mind doesn't really. What table is really an understanding. It's an understanding that enables us to make the determination whether an object we perceive is a table or not. It may have 3 legs, 6 legs, 8 legs. The top may be made of marble, of wood, but there are various elements. By looking at it, we make the determination that's a table. But that's an understanding that enables us at every time to make this determination while facing an object. But when we think of table, we never think of table in abstract manner. Either we hear the sound table in our language, or we hear table, table, tisch, or we see the word written, table, table, that's the same, or tisch, avec un T majuscule, with a capital T, or we have a picture of some particular table, right? An image. So, and perhaps if we are not able to see, then we have some tactile reference of a flat surface at a certain height, and then we touch the legs, and so we have some feelings of what the table is. But anyway, it's always something which is in terms of the senses. When we think, we always think in terms of the senses.
Interesting.
And that's why our dream, that's what makes the dream possible, because in the dream we have bodily sensations, we have external sense perceptions. But our thoughts are in terms of the senses. We hear the thoughts, we see the writing, we see images.
Mm-hmm. But the pure understanding of the thought, of the universal, like, table itself, that understanding.
Understanding happens between thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding is of a different nature of thoughts.
And then the thoughts come, superimposed on the understanding.
For instance, what table is really is the understanding of what a table is, ultimately. Yeah, and the word table then is a label that labels this understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Just as the word circle, a circle is an understanding. And the word circle is a label that reminds us of this understanding.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask this question simply because it came to me last night, and I know it's going to push your buttons because you have you have whooped somebody who asked this question in one of your webinars. But I truly felt it, and I just need to ask so we can shed some light on it. And that is, the absolute reality is beyond being and non-being. Experientially, I don't know if that's possible. But is that anything to even be open to possibility-wise?
Well, it depends on what you call being.
What we refer to as being and non-being. I'm not talking about realms of phenomena, non-phenomena, realms of...
Yeah, but I don't know, when you say the ultimate reality is beyond being and non-being.
Non-being, yeah.
What do you mean by being?
By being is, I would take it down to awareness then, which we discussed earlier, that's an attribute to the absolute. It's not the absolute. By that definition, then there should be awareness, and then the opposite of awareness.
Well, when we say that awareness is not is an attribute of the absolute, is not the absolute, in Indian logic, if you cannot have A without B or B without A and B are considered to be the same. So, in the sense that you cannot have reality without awareness and awareness without reality, awareness and reality are the same, and awareness is not simply an attribute of reality. So it depends how you construe that. If you if you see awareness as something that is an attribute of reality and that can go in and out of existence, if you will, whereas reality remains as the background of it, then yes, awareness would be an attribute, if you will, of reality that is not always manifested, if you will. That is not. But precisely the revelation, the non-dual revelation, is precisely that awareness never goes out of existence, and that awareness is reality, and reality is awareness. So that's the revelation. It's very important, because otherwise we go into this notion, for instance, that awareness is an emerging property of a complex system, that the complex system is the real substratum of it that manifests it or may not manifest it if it is not complex enough, etc. So, as an example,
Right,
it's not
yeah,
the
but
only
we're beyond that part.
we are way beyond that. I
we're not
agree.
talking that,
We are
yeah.
way beyond that. But nevertheless, the question hinges upon whether awareness is seen as a necessary and sufficient condition for reality or not. In which case, it is equivalent to reality, mathematical.
Okay, so you just happened to mention mathematical, and this just came to my mind. So I used to, when I started this, think about the absolute reality as absolute value of a number.
As absolute?
Absolute value of a number. It's absolute value of 1, right? That can be positive, can be negative, but it's absolutely 1. I moved to 0, which doesn't have an absolute value, but it can certainly, before a number means nothing, in front of a number means 10 times more.
Well,
You mentioned mathematics.
We have to make a distinction between 0 as a digit, as a numeral, and 0 as the number 0. And I would challenge the absolute value of 0 is 0.
Okay, fair enough.
At least by convention among
Right.
mathematicians.
Right.
Yeah, it's 0.
And then my second question is about memories.
Is
and
what?
Memories. And the feelings that accompany them, or I'm actually the feelings that accompany them are one of missing, if you will, like missing someone or something. Like yesterday, I was petting your dog, and God, I started crying because I missed my dogs. As you know, so and I was thinking as I was sitting here, okay, so tomorrow's my last night here. I'm going to go away with a lot of good memories. Do I go back to them to feel the love that I felt, or is that going to be a play of mine from there on?
Well, it happens. We have to see what happens when we, in a case like that, when the memory of a being we love, it could be an animal, it could be a human being, and dogs are often much nicer than many human beings. Certainly. And then we have the memory, and we see the image or we remember something, and they take us to this place of love that we have shared with them. You know, and it's beautiful. It is a pointer. It takes us to the experience. And then we see, oh, I miss the dog, because we attribute it to the dog as an object, right? Okay. But before that, there is the sweetness of the love. You see, and then the center, I'm missing the object that seems to
I see.
deliver.
So I'm again misplacing it, but really.
But
what
we
I'm
have to
getting at,
understand that this, the memory, in fact, in this case, it is a little bit like a work of art that takes us to the absolute. Also, the memory of loving moment we have, or loved ones, or even loved ones that are passed away, takes us to the love we share with them, and which is in fact our real being, you know.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Francis. I just have a clarifying question. You said that if A needs...
It's my book.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Which one?
Perfume of Silence.
Oh, that's Rupert's. Okay, go ahead.
So you said that if A cannot exist without B and B cannot exist without A, then A and B have to be the same thing.
You see, that's what I
Uh-huh.
just said.
Right.
They have to be considered to be the same thing. If you cannot have one without the other, it's like the head and the tail of the cat. You see, in fact, that's a cat. You see, the image I use often is a scientific experiment when there is a cat in a big box, in a big box. And there is a very, very tiny window, a vertical window, a slit, you know. And there is a physicist observing what is going on inside through this window. And usually what he sees the head, you know, and then he sees the tail of the cat. So the conclusion of the physicist is the event head is the cause and the event tail is the effect. You see what I mean? Whereas in fact, if he could see things from a wider window, he would see the cat. And then the fact that the head is the cause of the tail then doesn't make sense any longer, right? So it is because, and that applies generally to our view of causation. It's because we look at the universe through the extremely narrow window of the human, limited window of the human robot or sensing apparatus and data processing apparatus, that we see cause and effect. If we could look at reality from a wider perspective, then we would see that everything there is no cause and effect, there is no time. Because the physicist says the event head comes before the event tail, so there is time, right? But if you look, you open the cage and you see that there is only a cat. There is not an event head, there is not an event tail, and there is not an event head that comes before. And now, with this metaphor, I can also describe what a miracle is. A miracle is the cat moving backwards.
So to kind of relate that to humans, or I guess us, well, they're the same thing, but
You know, I am aware that I answered on a tangent, but it was fun, right? So but the point is that if you have two events, you cannot have one without the other, like the head and the tail. It is just the human mind making a distinction between them. But for the cat doesn't even know he has a head and a tail, right? For the cat, there is a totality. So it's a human vantage point. It's a mind that creates a duality, if you will. But duality is never experienced. We never experience two things. We only experience from moment to moment that. And the duality exists only in hindsight by putting two events, A and B, comparing them. But in fact, it's an operation of the mind. That's why in the now, there is never ignorance. Ignorance is always in reference to the past and to the future. We need this separation to have a two, to have duality. You know, this entire thing, this entire universe, we take it for granted, but it's such an extraordinary mystery. It's just such a display of beauty, of intelligence, beyond anything we can. And we say, okay, that's simple, no. We think we have figured it out. We never. If you think about what modern science, modern physics, the view of the world of modern physics, which is more true to reality, it's a better map of the terrain than the usual view of the world of the caveman. It's such an extraordinary world out there. It's such that, for instance, the fact that space and time are not independent. The fact that space, time, and matter, energy, are not independent, that they are related. In our view, we say, okay, I put this object here. I put my watch here, or I put my watch on the table, it's the same time. No, it isn't. I turn an object by 360 degrees, I get the same object. No. I turn an electron by 360 degrees, I get a different object. It has the opposite spin. So I have to turn it by twice, 360 degrees, to get the same object. We don't, at our human scale, we don't see that. But that is more real, this extraordinary. So we take for granted, we assume that what we see here is true at all scales. It is not. So it's It's really mind-blowing, so that's what I'm trying to do, to blow your minds. So you don't know anything. And it's better than tequila.